Excellent. Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. I have the pleasure of sharing. I did put together a slideshow. I'll try to go through it quickly. Sharing with you an update on a really neat project that the BC Ministry of Environment has been working on in partnership with several First Nations in British Columbia to enhance notification. And I just want to acknowledge up front that there's a lot of work and a lot of faces that should be here on screen before mine. Christina Cinnamon and her team at the Ministry of Environment have really pushed an amazing project through as quickly as I've ever seen anything happen in government, honestly. So a little bit of background about the emergency program, and John Waller, who is just up, could probably speak to this much better than I. But they do deal with a number of annual reports, spill reports that come in under their Emergency Management Act. John gave you a good overview, I think, of the response landscape there. So just to say that prior to this this technology pilot that I'll speak about, the notification process was essentially hand notifying off of lists people when they got these spill reports. So you can imagine how that starts to look for duty officers across a very large province like BC. So there's been a recognition at the provincial level for quite a while that their historical process was labor intensive and that there was room for improvement. And this intention to improve their notification system, and specifically to do it in a manner that progresses the province's commitment to the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, on federal and provincial, Canadian and British Columbia policies on reconciliation, and to try to democratize the way that First Nations and Indigenous communities receive information about incidents that are in their territories or potentially affecting them. And so the will to kind of to undertake this work, she'll stay here for a second, really came from, I'm going to move forward, really came from a broader planning table where we've been working regionally with partners from Canada and from BC, several different federal departments within Canada on collaborative marine response planning under the Reconciliation Framework Agreement for bioregional oceans governance and management that has 14 or so signatory nations in BC. And so that group had been active in working through collaborative planning. And one of the sticky issues that came up right away, as it often does, is notification. So this aligned with the province's intention to try to enhance their notification process and led to a pilot group where BC developed a new technology to essentially try to automate and improve the efficiency of the notification process. And the background picture in this slide is actually a tabletop. We had a virtual tabletop exercise in January of 2022, where we had almost 80 people on the line from 18 different organizations, and we're able to, over the course of a day, methodically work through connecting people on the ground in nations with response officers from various organizations and really try to decode what the challenges were, so that we could envision a solution. So one of the big challenges that the First Nations identified was that the kind of the old way of having your notification list, where you've got a name and a First Nation and a contact information, and potentially some sort of a geographic boundary, though those typically had to do with consultation areas, which from a First Nation perspective doesn't always line up with traditional territories, or areas of interest for those nations. So one of the major things that this new process did was it created a subscription interface where First Nations can essentially identify the area that they want to hear about things happening. And so you see the difference here. And this also reflects that while I think from those of us with a Western background, think about Indigenous as, kind of it can be easy to sort of try to homogenize that concept, where in fact you're dealing with a number of sovereign nations and cultures that have been around for thousands of years, and have their own self-determined interests that they can express. So the notification areas are polygons that the province works with each First Nation to identify, and that becomes a geographic area within which they receive every single notification that comes in through the provincial system. So we piloted it. These are the nations that were involved in the pilot project. It's sort of central to the north coast of BC, and we gave a lot of opportunities for feedback. And so our two kind of target user groups were the recipients, who are the First Nations, but also the response officers within the Ministry of Environment, who are ultimately the people who have to adapt to this new system, make it work. And again, I think you can imagine the change management process of making such a radical change. And, I said January of 2022 is when we had that exercise. So the pilot was up and running within 6 months of that. So it really happened quite quickly. And so the some of the feedback that we received from the nations was they liked the ease of signing up. They really appreciated hearing about more incidents. One of the things that we heard a lot up front in scoping this was we don't know what we don't know. And so having exposure to everything that comes into the province kind of open that gateway to understanding the type and scope of incidents that are happening, everything from small refrigerant spills to vessels sinking. Another issue that came up is that by making this notification faster and more efficient, there are trade-offs in that when you're getting initial incident information, as we all know, it's incomplete, it's unvetted, and kind of building that understanding into the socialization of this tool actually has worked, I think, fairly well. So from the response officers, I think some of the feedback was they felt more confident that they were notifying the correct First Nations about incidents. I mean, everybody wants to do the right thing, and we don't always know what that is. So it was empowering, I think, in that sense. They found the process to be more efficient, and there was an interim challenge that is slowly waning as this technology is getting rolled out for the province. But in the interim, the environmental response officers have had to actually work within both systems simultaneously. And so that I think has been a burden, and it's been a burden that the province has been willing to take on in the interest of enhancing the notification through this pilot. So post-pilot, as of this month, we went from those 6 nations to 25 First Nations who are receiving, typically the recipients who are also self-determined by the nation involve their on-the-ground personnel that John spoke about earlier, as well as some of their elected leadership. So they're all receiving real-time notifications through this program. It has continued to work really well. I'm monitoring on behalf of the nations involved in the pilot, and have a lot of visibility. And it's just kind of it's lowering a veil, and creating more transparency for First Nations about how other orders of government are receiving information. So as the province has been rolling this out, and this is the part of the process I've been less involved with. So if I hope I don't misspeak at all, John. If I do, please jump in on the text or on the chat rather. But to try to roll this out more broadly, there's sensitivity around here. We have a new solution where the government take it. So there's been a lot of purposeful work around engaging with First Nations on kind of a bilateral basis, so kind of one-on-one. The province has been holding information sessions all along, where they kind of explain some of the slides in this PowerPoint are also from that presentation. And then they've had sort of periodic sign-up windows where if you participate in an information session and your nation is interested in participating in the new notification system, you then can get onboarded during these windows. And that's kind of a logistical consideration based on how the tech works. So I'll just show you a few screen shares. The vendor that they've been working with is Alertable, and it's a fairly established company that does a lot of emergency notifications throughout Canada for different governments. This is a closed module, so you may have an Alertable app on your phone where you're receiving other emergency notifications. This is a specific closed application that is initiated through a sign up process, so that it's not open to the entire broad public. But there's a very intuitive sign up process. I've walked a lot of First Nations through it, where you identify which regions you're interested in, which areas of interest from a drop down list, and then you can select the manner in which you want to be notified. So the notifications come through three modalities, yeah, text, email, and voice call. All the text and the email both have links then to a web interface that actually has additional, it has the information as well as a map showing the location. And the website serves as a repository for updates as they come in. They also come in through the other modalities. A sample of a phone call. It's a robot reading a condensed version of the spill report. And as people become comfortable with the technology, I don't think there are a lot of people that are only subscribing to voice. I think most nations have some sort of a text or an email so that they have that link. But the phone call kind of prompts you to look for more information in that email. And here's an example of the email notifications that come through, and as updates are generated, they become the top of the email, and you get the entire kind of incident information there. As I mentioned, there's an app. So there's an alertable app generally that you can use for all kinds of different emergency alerts. It ties into a bunch of different systems. You can then add the pollution reporting module into that app within, like I said, those closed groups that sign up through the province. And so some additional, that's, where am I going? Okay, apologies. So some of the highlights of what we found to be successful and challenging through kind of the rollout, there was, a lot of very strong participation. There's been an opportunity for coastal First Nations response staff to become more engaged. The more you hear about, the more you're curious, the more you are able to ask questions. And again, it's a very fast push out. I think there is a step where the province receives notifications. They go through their Web EOC module, and there's a human interface to kind of push the button and send out the alert. But that's a 20 to 30-minute iteration for most incidents, so much faster than a duty officer calling, 20 or 30 people. There's been, challenges with expectation management, as is, often the case with new technologies. Again, the information quality is not amazing up front, though it's getting better. And I think as people get more familiar with what type and quality of information you get early on, there's more comfort with the system. We've had challenges in that it really is a one-way push at this point. It does not link into kind of a two-way communication. That's still something that happens, outside through human contact and through reaching out. And so, and as this system has become more adopted, that gap, I think, will start to be something that we try to address. And there's still some issues with the geospatial boundaries, because when notifications come in, they're not always georeferenced, and it's often someone on a phone with a bad connection using, place names. And again, BC is a vast province. You've got somebody trying to triangulate that. So have been times when notifications go out for the wrong area of interest. Those are generally dealt with eventually. But so those have been some of the challenges. And again, I apologize for racing through this, but I don't want to penalize the next speaker. But I think some of our sort of takeaways from this process that may translate over to other technology adoptions is that it really has provided a platform that has neutralized some challenging dynamics, or at least sort of given another space to sort of work through them. And it really has fostered transparency, because there's no filtering by the government agency to decide who hears what about what incident. It has, we've learned time and time again. I've been part of a much broader planning effort with First Nations in Canada and BC for several years, that this work takes time and that collaboration, is incremental. And that, getting to the point of finding out about something is important. And then those next steps of how you collaborate in making decisions, we're still working on that. But I think a big one, and again, this goes back to my personal observation of how quickly the province selected a vendor, put this into place, and rolled it out is, a lot of it was trial and error. The nations involved in the initial pilot and some of the subsequent rollouts got to see a lot of the warts. It wasn't all smooth sailing, but that in itself is a trust building exercise. Kind of learning together, being transparent about the fact that this isn't going to solve everything, but it may make things a little bit better. And so I think that, that is a big takeaway of mine. Again, I have a small role in the beginning of this project. Coastal First Nations Great Bear Initiative and the BC Ministry of Environment both funded it. Many other people were part of building this technology and contributing to it. And I will happily take any questions now, but Christina Cinnamon is the program lead for BC, and she's really the brains and the intent behind this whole project.